Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital spoilers for the coming 3 weeks, November 10th to November 28th, reveal that Jason Morgan will hang Pascal while Professor Henry Hank Dalton has some bad timing. Sonny Corinthos also seems poised to ruin ADA Justine Turner's plan, so let's bandy what's ahead in Port Charles. The week of November 10th to 14th will bring Giovanni Gio Palmieri and Emma Scorpio Drake's wild discovery, so they should eventually foray the lab and see for themselves what's outside. While Emma and Gio reel over what they find, Michael Corinthos will reach a big decision. After Michael makes a shocking move, it could affect Willow Tate's forthcoming trial and leave her with questions. As the mayor race turns into an agony, Laura Collins might consider dropping out of the race and giving up her job. Since Laura's going to immolate commodity in the coming occurrences, she might surrender to Jen Sidwell if it means guarding someone close to her. Sidwell made it clear that he intended on backing Laura into a corner, so he may pull that off soon enough. In the fate of the lab break heft, Britt will have some fires to put out. Jason Morgan may push for answers so he can help Britt deal with all the drama. Now that Pascal is in Port Charles, it's only a matter of time until he crosses paths with Britt and Jason. You can go. Jason will bark some pitfalls at Pascal and advise that he'd more not put anyone Jason cares about in peril again. At some point, Dalton will have some bad timing, so he might be responsible for an interruption that's ahead for Jason and Britt. On the other hand, Dalton might make another mess rather and leave Sidwell upset over his boob. Sidwell will have another heated battle with Britt before he eventually tries to bait Ava Jerome further into his web of charm. As for Gio, he could face felonious consequences, especially if he goes the redundant afar to cover for Emma. Dante's going to feel wedged between his professional duties and particular issues, so that may involve Joe's arrest. Over with Sonny, he'll gash down a many further of Justine's walls. Justine will get swept up in her magnet to Sonny, so her manipulative plan may take a back seat to her burning solicitations. During the week of November 17th, 21, Jocelyn Jacks will have a hard time navigating her new charge. Jack Brennan expects Jocelyn to score intel on Marco Rios as well as Sidwell, but Joss will want to cover Lucas Jones in the process. It'll just be tough for Jocelyn to pull that off without committing disloyalty. Jocelyn may also run into Pascal sooner or laterally and realize he's the new butler at Windmere. That could bring back some traumatic recollections for Jocelyn and leave S. Vaughn on edge, too. Carly Spencer will inescapably keep a close eye on this situation while she continues conniving Brennan's destruction. Meanwhile, G.H. Pence will have to offer up further mystification pieces about what's really going on with Anna Devane, who obviously isn't just out on a special WSB charge. Someone abducted Anna rather, so there may be further hints about whether Caesar Faison is to condemn or just a Faison quacksalver. The week of November 24th to 28th could bring Valentine's escape plot once he's landed at a stateside captivity. Valentine may be on the verge of a flight scheme grounded on fall exercise word, so that could be part of his revengeful plan with Carly. There's also a chance Valentine could get tangled up in some Anna deliverance mayhem, so that's commodity to pound over. As Thanksgiving draws near, Nathan West may be invited to celebrate with James West and his family. Although Nathan and James will keep erecting a father-son bond, there must be a reason why Britt was originally so concerned about it passing. The secrets of Nathan's missing 7 times will have to be revealed sooner or laterally, but he could be putting James at threat by pulling him closer in the meantime. General Hospital spoilers say disquieting news is still to come in Nathan's plot, so stick with us for updates on all the unraveling mystifications. The air in the chapel of General Hospital was thick, not just with the scent of lilies and beeswax, but with the palpable weight of unspoken histories. Sunlight, filtered through a stained glass depiction of the Good Samaritan, cast fractured jewels of color across the assembled guests, painting their anxious faces in hues of ruby, sapphire, and gold. At the center of this serene storm was the font, a simple stone vessel that today felt like the axis upon which all their worlds would turn. Today, they were there to baptize a child, to wash away original sin and welcome an innocent soul into the grace of God. Yet, for every adult present, the ceremony was a stark reminder of the sins they could not rinse away, the lies, the betrayals, the secrets festering just beneath the surface of their best intentions. The child, swaddled in a generations-old christening gown, was a picture of oblivious peace. In the arms of his mother, Lois Cerullo, he gurgled contentedly, unaware that he was the tiny, fragile anchor in a room teeming with riptides. Lois herself was a fortress of forced calm, her knuckles white where they gripped her son. Her eyes, however, kept flicking toward the chapel's entrance, a nervous tic she couldn't control. She was waiting for someone. She was always waiting for him. Ned Quartermain, standing stiffly beside his wife, Olivia Falconeri, was a portrait of a man haunted by his own choices. The encouraging words he had offered Lois earlier, "Everything will be fine, Lois. You're a wonderful mother," had felt hollow even as he'd spoken them. His gaze was fixed on the baby, his mind a whirlwind of a life not lived, of a truth he had buried so deep he sometimes forgot it wasn't a lie. The baptism felt like a mockery of his own duplicity, a public blessing for a private agony. The priest began to speak, his voice a resonant baritone that filled the sacred space. "We are gathered here today to celebrate a new beginning, to welcome this child into the light of God's love, to cleanse him and mark him as Christ's own forever." New beginning. The phrase echoed cruelly in the ears of those gathered. For Brooklyn, who had just uncovered a devastating secret about her parentage, it felt like an ending. For sunny Corinthos, who saw the ceremony as a fragile bulwark against the chaos of his world, it was a hope he desperately clung to. For Cyrus Renaud, sitting in the back pew like a patient predator, it was simply the opening act of a much darker drama. The first crack in the ceremony's peaceful facade appeared not with a shout, but with a whisper. As the priest anointed the child with oil, tracing a cross on his forehead, a latecomer slipped into the chapel. It was Damien Spinelli, the jackal, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his face pale and etched with an urgency that had nothing to do with the holy rites at hand. He didn't take a seat. Instead, his eyes scanned the congregation frantically before locking onto Maxie Jones. He gestured subtly, a sharp, cutting motion near his throat that screamed danger. Maxie, her heart lurching into her throat, excused herself with a murmured apology about feeling faint and slipped out of the pew. The two met in the shadowy alcove by the hymnal cabinet, their whispered conversation a stark counterpoint to the priest's blessings. "Spinelli, what is it?" "You're scaring me," Maxie hissed, her hand gripping his arm. "The Matrix, it has been glitching, my beloved Maxie," Spinelli whispered, his words tumbling out in a nervous rush. "A digital phantom, a ghost in the machine I have been tracking for weeks. I believed it was a simple corporate espionage algorithm, but its encryption was a Russian nesting doll of malevolent code. I finally cracked the final layer this morning." "What did you find?" Maxie asked, a cold dread seeping into her veins. "It's not a what," Spinelli corrected, his eyes wide with a terrible knowledge. "It's a who. The algorithm wasn't stealing data. It was a reconnaissance tool, a predator profiling its prey. It was compiling dossiers, schedules, habits, vulnerabilities, on several key figures in Port Charles. And it was feeding the data to a single, encrypted destination." He swallowed hard, the sound audible in the tense silence. The destination was a server owned by a shell corporation, which is, in turn, owned by a holding company that traces back to Pikeman. The name landed between them like a physical blow. Pikeman. The shadowy, violent organization that had been a thorn in Sunny's side for months, a group known for its ruthlessness and its terrifying efficiency. "Who, Spinelli?" Maxie pressed, her voice trembling. "Who are they targeting?" Before Spinelli could answer, the chapel door swung open again, this time with violent force, crashing against the walls and silencing the priest mid-prayer. All heads turned. There, silhouetted against the harsh hallway light, stood Cody Bell. He was breathing heavily, his clothes disheveled, a fresh cut bleeding above his eye. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled piece of paper. The encouraging atmosphere of the baptism evaporated, replaced by a chilling premonition. The angry threats that had been whispered in back alleys and over encrypted phones had just walked into the house of God. "He's dead," Cody announced, his voice raw and cracking. He wasn't speaking to the room, he was looking directly at Dante Falconeri, who was already on his feet, his detective's instincts kicking in. They killed him. They left this thing on his body. A collective gasp rippled through the chapel. Olivia reached for Ned's hand. Lois pulled her baby closer. Sonny moved instinctively, placing himself between the threat and his family. Cody, what are you talking about? Who's dead? Dante demanded, moving swiftly down the aisle. It's Marcus, Cody choked out, the name sending a fresh wave of shock through those who knew him. Marcus had been a low-level enforcer, a man trying to go straight. They found him in the warehouse district. It wasn't a clean hit, Dante. It was a message. It was torture. Cody strode forward, his boots echoing on the stone floor, and thrust the crumpled paper into Dante's hands. It was a cheap, printed flyer, the kind used for a missing pet or a garage sale. But the image on it was a professionally taken, recent photograph of a man they all knew. And scrawled across his face in bold, red marker was a single word, November. The room fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. The word hung in the air, more terrifying than any explicit threat. It was a deadline. A death sentence. November? Laura Collins whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. What does that mean? It means one of us is going to die in November, Sonny stated, his voice low and dangerously calm. His eyes swept the room, cataloging every face, every flicker of fear. And Pikeman just sent the invitation. The baptism was forgotten. The holy water in the font seemed to mock them. This was no longer a celebration of life, it was a briefing for a potential murder. Dante smoothed out the flyer, his face grim. This is a list, he said, his professional detachment a thin veil over his own horror. He read the names aloud, each one a hammer blow to the congregation. Sonny Corinthos. A predictable target, the king of the castle. Sonny merely nodded, his jaw tight. Jason Morgan. A name that evoked a ghost. A few people flinched, the pain of his loss still fresh. Carly Spencer. A wave of unease. She had made as many enemies as she had friends. Drew Kane. His recent return and newfound corporate power had clearly put him in someone's crosshairs. Ned Quartermain. This one caused a ripple of confusion. Ned? The respectable, business-minded Quartermain? He paled visibly, his mind racing to his recent clashes with Pikeman over a waterfront development deal. And John Jagger Cates. The final name was the most shocking. The former FBI agent, now the police commissioner, was the embodiment of the law they were threatening. 6 names, Dante concluded, his voice heavy. 1 target. The hit is scheduled for November. Panic, cold and sharp, began to pierce the initial shock. The encouraging words they had all exchanged upon arriving, "So good to see you, the baby is beautiful, we should do this more often," now felt like the naive chatter of lambs before the slaughter. It was Spinelli, forgotten in the alcove, who broke the next wave of the story. He stepped forward, his laptop now open, his fingers flying across the keys. The Jackal concurs with the grim assessment, he announced, his voice gaining a measure of grim certainty. The digital phantom I uncovered, its primary target was not a corporation. It was an individual. The algorithm was designed to find a pattern, a vulnerability, a perfect window of opportunity for a strike. It was building a blueprint for an assassination. He turned the screen to face Dante and Sonny. A complex web of data was displayed, with one name at the center, highlighted in pulsing red. The reconnaissance was hyper-focused, far more intensive than for any of the other names on that list. The data packets contained detailed analysis of daily routes, security detail rotations, favorite haunts, and even personal relationships that could be exploited as leverage. Sonny's eyes narrowed, reading the data. Who is it, Spinelli? Who are they planning to kill in November? Spinelli looked up, his face a mask of sorrow and dread. He looked past Sonny, past Dante, his gaze settling directly on one person in the crowd. The color drained from that person's face as Spinelli spoke the name that sealed their fate. The identity of the victim was suddenly, terrifyingly revealed. It was Brooklyn Quartermain. A silent scream seemed to tear through the chapel. Lois let out a choked cry, clutching her son so tightly he began to wail. Ned Quartermain looked as if he'd been shot, all the air leaving his lungs in a single, pained gasp. Olivia reached for him, her own face a mask of horror. "No," Ned whispered, the word a broken plea. "Not my daughter." The revelation was a masterstroke of psychological terror. Brooklyn wasn't a mob kingpin or a powerful CEO. She was a young woman, a Quartermain by blood but still finding her place in the world. She was vulnerable. She was beloved. Her death wouldn't just be a power play, it would be a heart-rending tragedy designed to inflict maximum pain on the entire community, to show that no one, not even the seemingly innocent, was safe. The angry threats of pikemen were no longer abstract. They had a name, a face. They had a date. The baptism was officially over, shattered by the specter of a future funeral. The priest stood helplessly by the font, his book of prayers hanging limply in his hand. There would be no more blessings today. Sonny Corinthos turned to the room, his expression transforming from shock to a cold, granite resolve. The peace he had sought for this day was gone, replaced by the familiar, chilling mantle of the warlord. "They made this personal," he said, his voice cutting through the panicked whispers. "They think by targeting a young woman, they can paralyze us with fear. They are mistaken." He looked at Cody, at Dante, at Spinelli, and finally at a devastated Ned. "They've given us a name and a deadline. That's more than most people get. We have 6 weeks. 6 weeks to turn this city upside down. 6 weeks to find pikemen and burn their organization to the ground before they can pull the trigger." He walked over to a trembling Brooklyn, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. His voice softened, but lost none of its intensity. "No one is going to hurt you, Brooklyn. You hear me? We will bury them first." But as the guests filed out of the chapel, their faces pale and their hearts racing, the encouraging words felt fragile. The stone font, meant for life, now seemed to foreshadow a grave. The name Brooklyn echoed in the silent, sacred space, a promise of a storm gathering on the horizon. The baptism of a child had ended, and the long, anxious countdown to a November murder had begun. The game was now a war for a life, and the first shot had been fired not with a bullet, but with a single, horrifying name.